Throughout Left 4 Dead 1 and 2, there's been plenty of weapons that didn't make the final versions of the game. And some of these were in weird versions of Left 4 Dead. And also make sure to subscribe if you're watching this video, thank you. Now stay tuned because it's going to get funky. The Riot Shield is one of the examples of a melee weapon that was very close to probably making the final game. It's technically in every copy of Left 4 Dead 2, but it goes unused. It ultimately did not make the final cut. The current version that can be enabled with mods essentially can make it spawn in campaigns where it's allowed to spawn, so a lot of custom maps. You'll see the Riot Shield and the animations are rather limiting. It doesn't have sway movements like many other melees in the game, and it mostly just stays in place, and it is really ugly because it takes up a lot of the screen. However, survivors do have animations while holding this in third person mode. It makes a lot of people think that this melee weapon was actually very close to making it officially, considering there's textures, animations, even HUD, which I know a lot of people think is really ugly. This is actually similar to the Tonfa. They look very close animation wise, and yes, they have a very similar hit swing. It's rather rare for melee weapons to be this similar to each other, but it means that the melee weapon is really fast, and you can view this by seeing the hit rays and noticing, yes, they're really not that much different from each other, as the Riot Shield could have been a weapon that maybe could fall off Riot zombies in the parish. This is definitely interesting because both the Tonfa and the Riot Shield could have existed in this campaign. This would actually mean that the Riot Shield might have gotten replaced by the Tonfa, considering they're both similar, but unfortunately the Riot Shield did not make it into Left 4 Dead 2, at least officially. Now some people speculate the Riot Shield could have potentially blocked infected attacks with the shield or take less damage when hit on the side, but in my opinion, good luck balancing that mechanic because it would probably be really hard to figure out how to balance something like that. There's mods that do try to enable this idea, but this is probably not the direction the weapon was actually going to go in game. It probably would have been really unbalanced. Imagine a weapon that had a debuff system or a way you could block. It would be really silly. I think it's sad that the Riot Shield didn't make the cut considering how close it was to making the final game. At the same time, I do get maybe why it was cut. The way the Riot Shield spawns, it kind of is funny too. You just get to know how unfinished it is. Ultimately, this ended up making the melee weapon redundant, as it's kind of annoying how big this Riot Shield is and it just takes up a lot of the screen. And it has a really lifeless half swing animation and makes it feel off compared to the other melees in the game. So I think the reason why it was cut was it was probably just redundant compared to the Tonfa. So maybe it could have been purposefully similar to the Tonfa, like the baseball bat and cricket bat are, but your guess is as good as mine. But the Riot Shield lacks a deploy animation, its sub is just an attack animation, and it doesn't really have a look, pose, or walking animation. It also sometimes glitches out when deploying this weapon and you'll get hunter arms for whatever reason. The only thing holding this melee weapon from spawning in game is really no campaign enables it. Some people think the fact that the weapon doesn't have a shield function programmed into it was a missed opportunity, as a lot of mods tend to try to reinvent this weapon. But this also might be the reason why it was cut, as you can imagine balancing this weapon would have been a nightmare if this fantasy was real. Like, sorry, I can't smoke the left side of your body because the Riot Shield is in the way. It would have been silly. Oh, you can't boom me, you have the Riot Shield out. It just seems a little OP. Could you imagine reflecting a death charge with a Riot Shield? Like, it just wouldn't be a good idea. Even if it were to potentially break or it was a temporary item like a chainsaw, I still think this would have been silly. As if the Riot Shield was in this game in this form, like a lot of mods tend to go in this direction, I just don't think it would have been good. The next cut melee weapon is something you don't say every day. The didgeridoo. Now, don't ask me how to pronounce that. I said apple orchid instead of orchard, okay? I'm a silly goose sometimes. The didgeridoo is an extremely niche instrument. If I had to guess, the weapon had to have been cut, probably because it wouldn't fit the environment of Left 4 Dead at all. Could you imagine just finding this thing on the floor randomly? It just wouldn't make any sense. And I mean, neither does the cricket bat in a way, considering this takes place in America, but that's besides the point. I think this would be even more out of place. It literally just sounds like this. It was never finished, and it doesn't have a UV map. Its view model animations are all not complete, and the weapon textures are all black and purple, which is not good. It also reuses the animations from the fire axe. The weapon is less developed than the Riot Shield, as it doesn't even have a way of spawning because of the mission text for each campaign obviously not allowing it. For whatever reason, there was technically textures for this weapon that are unused, and obviously them not being connected to the weapon is pretty weird, but you can actually download mods that re-add the textures to the didgeridoo. Apparently Gabe Newell's own didgeridoo was actually the one he had in his office, this, and shout outs to Splinks who actually found this out. If you don't know the story, the didgeridoo was originally going to be a bonus melee weapon awarded to the Australian players whose games were heavily censored. They also got the CSGO weapons for this reason, as before everyone else. The project was ultimately scrapped as the untextured world model was left in the game's resources, although even though it was cut like the Riot Shield, there's actually mods that add the finished model and textures that allow the didgeridoo to spawn in game. It's another blunt melee weapon where you can take a look at it here. Yes, apparently this is Gabe Newell's didgeridoo. I know, weird. There was originally going to be a flare gun potentially in the game, and this is even referenced in Hard Rain, although we don't know how far in development this got. And a rocket launcher could potentially have been a cut idea. And there even is weapons that are in various concept arts and even in the campaign art, but there's no proof of these weapons ever being added to the game. A lot of these are just really silly, basic looking weapons, and also Coach had a compound bow, which would have been cool, I'm not gonna lie. According to some of the files, there was going to be more pistols in the game, and the pistol textures files, there's actually 4 pistols, which implies maybe there was going to be more variants of the pistol. The laser sights and melee weapons were actually originally planned for Left 4 Dead 1, and the laser sight can technically be modded in that game. That's how close they actually were to making those elements, but these will obviously be added to the sequel. At some point during development, the M249 was supposed to be appeared an usable weapon, as evidence to a lot of concept arts, and there was even pieces of concept arts for weapons held by Bill, hinting that they were originally going to be maybe intended for the game. We don't really know though. This could just been a bunch of basic weapon art they were just messing around with. And even in the cut campaign, damn it, there was leftover data referencing tier 3 weapons that didn't make the actual game. Also in Dead Center Map 2, there is weapons in the gun shop that are totally mentioned while not actually being in the gun shop. They don't resemble these weapons at all, so this was most likely done to avoid copyright. And I always thought it was funny how none of the survivors holding these weapons actually match a lot of the official weapons in the game. It really made no sense. It is what it is. There is a bunch of weapons in the Japanese version of Left 4 Dead 2. This version of the game was made years back, and they seem to have been added very quickly, and most of them have very similar animations or stats to existing weapons. But I'm not gonna lie, if this was Left 4 Dead 3, some of these weapons would definitely fit that type of game, and I would love these weapons to somehow make a return in a sequel. I know we're never going to get one probably at this point, but in the original release, the guns were actually really overpowered compared to the other weapons in the game, and these weapons include the Scorpion, the submachine gun, the Thompson submachine gun, the police submachine gun, an MP5 that was different from the other MP5 that is technically was unused in the game at that point, but it does have different stats, meaning the MP5 was not readily available at the time. Police shotgun, an M45, a UMP submachine gun, a marksman rifle, a military rifle, which was a G36 assault rifle, an STG-44, an automatic rifle, an AK submachine gun, an automatic shotgun, a prototype rifle, which was an AK-12, an SVD rifle, an automatic rifle, a stray rifle, a box magazine shotgun, a FAMAS rifle, and a long sniper. The pistols included the G17, the PM Markov, and melee weapons were the Morningstar, or the Saber, the Longsword, a Gladius, a Baton, a Nail Bat, and even some special weapons like a different chainsaw, a pump-action grenade launcher, and a PKM machine gun. These weapons are all over the place, and some of them being borderline game-breaking when it comes to balance. But some of these weapons only have limited releases too, so it's not like you could use all of them right now. Yes, I actually really wanted an AA-12 in Left 4 Dead 2. It would fit the game so well, but it actually is in this version of the game for whatever reason. I don't know, maybe Left 4 Dead 3, but there's never going to be a Left 4 Dead 3, unfortunately. Channel memberships are down below if you guys want to join that and get videos early. Thank you. And also there's a Patreon, Discord, and an Instagram. Thank you. Take care.